Hello, I'm Dr. Katherine Horton. I would like to explain what a system inversion is. System inversions are actually deadly for an organization. It usually spells doom for the future, for profits, for general steerability of an organization like that. So it is after capture, one of the most important effects one needs to know about. For that, you can recognize the old diagram here. This is the organigram with the boss at the top, and then the senior managers or partners, then the middle managers or coordinators, and the employees here at the bottom. And what I did is I also drew a second diagram here on this side, which actually shows exactly the same organization, but this time I also try to indicate skill levels. Okay, and this will be just for the sake of the exercise, highly idealized. So I do not claim in any way that this is how it is in all organizations or across the board. I just want you to see an effect, and if I can amplify it, then you understand it better. So just for the sake of the argument, not because I think this is the reality out there, I'm going to say that this organization is now perfectly ordered according to, not intelligence, because that's too much a wishy-washy statement, and I don't even mean academic achievement or IQ. Let's call it skill, because every single job, whatever it is, you could be a childminder, you could be a professor of biochemistry, has a certain skill set, and there are some people which excel at certain skill sets and not others. So this is not to try to order this and claim that, oh, this is now, the person up there is the most intelligent person, even though a lot of the time the boss does think that. But this is not to mean that. It means skill set. And it could be that in one department, so these are separate departments, you can see that the trees are separate, and I could draw a line through here and none of the people interact. So this could be, for example, a technical department where the skill set is completely separate from, say, the customer service department, where again the skill set is different. And everybody knows that the best programmer is not necessarily the best person to answer customer complaints on the other end of the phone. So it really just means skill set, whatever the skills the role requires. But I have assumed that the people at the bottom, and I made them black, and if you have watched the video about capture, you think, ooh, this is something really, really bad. I mean, it's kind of bad. It will be taken to be bad, but it's not. I do not mean to say that, the bottom line employees in every company are bad or don't have any skills. I do not say that, okay? Just for the sake of the exercise, what I'm saying is that, and I don't have that many colored magnets, so maybe I should have taken something else. But what I'm saying is that the person in this idealized company, one level up from the bottom, has more skills. He or she is more skilled, and that's why they are there. Let's assume, okay? They got promoted because they're better at their job. Now the color coding between here and here is the same. And, I just didn't want to have too many separate colors to confuse matters. So I say, once you manage to do the jump between being maybe a technical person, very detailed, and you manage to do the jump to be a team leader, the jump from a team leader to another team is not that large. I think everybody understands that to excel yourself is a totally different matter from making other people excel, as a group. It again takes a different skill set. So what I'm saying is that for, different reasons, the people here at the bottom do not have the skills that the next level up has. This is not to mean, I say it again, not to mean educational level, not to mean intelligence, it means skill set, okay? So these people might have, their own skills, but these skills down here, I'm trying to indicate that they, in this idealized company, are not perfectly suited at this moment in time to the jobs up here and here, say, okay? So now we set this up, and I want to keep this diagram here, as a reminder of what the bland company looks like, right? This is just what a company looks like from the outside. You only have an organigram. You don't really have any more information about the skills. And this is exactly the same company with the skill set colored in, okay? And for the sake of the exercise, I have now made these black. The green ones mean they have a certain skill that the black ones do not have, and that's why they're suited for the role. And yes, at the top I made it, Mr. Golden Magnet, Golden Ball, is, the actual boss of the company. And because the boss usually stays fixed, he doesn't actually matter for the exercise, so don't interpret too much into it. I just wanted to have this as a fixed point. Okay, so now, what is a system inversion? Well, a system inversion I can highlight if I make clear what I actually mean by this, okay? And this is why I have this as a reference. What I mean to show now is a company stacked or ordered according to skill. And of course, I also factor in, you know, the assumption that being a regional manager or the manager of a local team doesn't maybe require the same skill set. You know, one level up, maybe you need even more skill sets to be maybe the vice president for Europe or something like that in a big company. But, you know, these things maybe should be colored differently, but for the sake of the exercise, they're roughly the same. And what's implied is that there's some sort of step change from going here, from here to the next level up, and the change between here and here is not as big. Okay, so this is now ordered here. Can you see that? And this is meant to be, can you read that? That's meant to be skill. So this is going towards increasing level of skill, say. Okay, and as it stands now, these people are on one level here, these people are on the same level, and these people are on the same level, and the boss, right, has his or her own skill. So these two diagrams are essentially matched. Okay, so this company is the same as this company, okay? Keep that in mind. I will just keep this as a reference so that when I start explaining things, you know that this is what it looked like. And this diagram is essentially just to indicate the sort of skill level. Okay, right, so we now have set the scene. So what is a system inversion? A system inversion comes about if this order, stacked according to skill, is inverted. How does that come about? Well, it comes about like this. Let's say, you know, there's a job opening somewhere, you know. Let's say this person here has retired, okay? Right. And then, for this job opening, the most immediate choice would be to promote somebody up from here to here. Right? Okay. Now, a company has got a choice. They either recruit from within their own, or what also sometimes happen, they recruit externally. Okay. Now, when they recruit externally, sometimes it happens that the person who they recruit isn't actually that skilled or that talented. It does happen. I know it is a total surprise to you if you work in a big corporation, but I assure you it does happen. So that would look like this. Instead of having the skill set that these people, you know, assuming they could be promoted up there, would have, the person who gets promoted has less skill as this band, so it's from here. That's why it's black. Okay. And then the company, you know, goes on and on and on. And then maybe at some point, you know, later on, again, someone leaves from maybe another place, okay? And then somebody gets promoted up. And this time they take people from the ranks, but they don't really, they're trying to recruit externally, but no one's really suited. And then, you know, they kind of are stuck, and they take somebody who at this point in time doesn't really have the skill set, but they need somebody. So they just put it, you know, take the person anyway. Even though they're not really that good at managing teams, but they give them a team leader role, and that also happens. Okay, and then some time passes, this company is, you know, tugging along, churning through the things it has to do. And then at a later point in time, what happens is that, again, somebody leaves from here because they retire, because they move to another country, or for many, many other reasons. And then again, there's a position to be filled. And this time, what happens is that this role doesn't get filled by somebody from here, these two, because management says, oh, well, to be honest, you know, this person isn't very good, that person, well, you know, could be, but then this name gets entered and someone else gets entered for, you know, totally unexpected reasons, say, which is, for example, that this boss here has got, let's say, some sort of sexual affair with someone down there, say. Or it could be someone else. It could be one of the middle managers here, right? Having, you know, an affair with somebody. But for reasons like that, because of this extra added, appeal, this person gets promoted to here, right? Instead of going via there, they leapfrog and they end up there. That also happens, and actually it happens quite a lot. I mean, here it looks like the jumps are huge, and I said, oh, this is a regional manager and that's the vice president for Europe. But depending on what the organizations are like, and I also emphasize this system inversion can happen anywhere in the organization, it does happen that people, because of reasons like that, leapfrog somebody else. It does happen. So in another company where these layers might be lower down, it happens even more frequently when you don't actually promote somebody for reasons like that to the vice presidentship, So this is just a schematic. But anyway, so this is what happened. Okay, and this happens gradually, so people will not notice that something is happening to the company, right? When this person got recruited, this connection wasn't really an issue, and that person wasn't there. And it just happens, 1 year this happens, another year that happens, and in the meantime, lots and lots of other things happen, so people don't really keep track of it. But now, what's the end result of this? It is essentially that the skill set at this level here is not matched to what the skill set should be. And that's indicated by the colors, right? This is the black layer. So really what the company in terms of its skills at this level looks like is actually much more like this, right? Because this was the black layer, remember, down here. And this layer of management is in terms of skill or intellect, or, I don't really want to bring intellect into it because it's got nothing to do with academic qualifications. At this level, the people just not, they are not at this standard. They're, as indicated by the colors, they're still at this standard. And then what happened? Well, these people were also this standard. And what happens to the people in between? Well, they can't really communicate with the boss because they do not actually have a direct connection. They only report to these people above them here, right? Here and here. So the person here can't really bypass their boss. And these two people here, who've got more brains than their boss, also can't bypass their boss. So what actually happens is, in terms of the functioning of the organization, the skill contained in the decision making at this level will not be up here, it will be down here, 2 levels below of what you would actually expect. Actually 3 levels, depending on how you're counting, 1 level down, 2 levels down of what you would actually expect. And now, what happened to this company here, right? It got pushed down in terms of quality. And all it did was the replacement of these 2 people here. I mean, I also added in that person because that also happens. And then once you have one person surrounded, I mean, this is he is leading his own team of, maybe not very skilled people, trying his best. But in group meetings at this level, he's kind of like outdone by, if you're unlucky, by 2 morons. If you ever sat in a group meeting trying to argue with 2 morons, you know what I mean, right? It can be very, very hard. Sorry, I brought intelligence into it. No, I really mean skill set, but you know what I mean. These are human systems, you understand human interactions, and you understand how these meetings here, right, at this level, can be very difficult if you're the only person who maybe understands the technical detail, right? I mean, a lot of programmers have that they go into meetings and they realize their boss doesn't know what they're talking about, and maybe their colleague also is not up to speed because they didn't have the training, and then you're suddenly there trying to explain, rocket science to milkmaids, essentially. This is what it feels like. Okay, but anyway, so this is essentially what happens, and this is now a system inversion because instead of the green people, the more skilled people being above the less skilled people, what you end up with is the less skilled people dominating the skilled people, you know. And if this doesn't happen, sorry, maybe it's clearer if I just do that, right? You have a sandwich, and instead of these green, you know, skilled people reporting to other skilled people who understand what they're on about, they actually report to people who can't really pass on what they're talking about to the boss. Okay, now what does this company look like from the point of view of a boss? And actually, as far as the boss is concerned, he doesn't know anything about the interactions here at all. Because most of the time he doesn't see them. He's not there at the meetings, he just asks these people to report to him. And just reporting about work, as you know, people can just razzle-dazzle and just chat and take conclusions or insights from these people and pass it on as their own. So as far as the boss is concerned, the quality of work that gets passed to him, because it's mostly in this layer that most of the work, or maybe even this layer, that most of the work gets done, as far as the boss is concerned, these people are still up here. You know, and this person is still up there. And as far as the boss is concerned, he's still talking to these two employees as if they were on this level. Why are they green? It's because these people of less skill pass on the skill of the people below them as their own. That happens all the time. So as far as the boss is concerned, nothing has changed in terms of quality, but as far as the company is concerned, that's an illusion. And the company has just plummeted down and gone to the dogs, essentially, right? So this is why it's just such a big thing. Because when it happens, to actually recover, sorry, maybe you can see it better, to recover from a company here, to lift it back up, what you need to do is replace an entire level of management. And that is extremely hard. Because these people have got high salaries, and also who's going to replace them if not the boss, right? Who's going to replace them at this level? Well, it can't be the brighter people, the more skilled people down here, can it? Because they are subordinate to this level of management. So what you actually end up with in a system inversion, and system inversion means the skill is inverted. So instead of, you know, it kind of going black, green, green, it kind of goes, you know, green and then black, you know, depending on how many levels you have. It could be ending up with the most skilled people at the bottom. Sorry, these were just to fix the paper. Okay, so do you know what I mean with a system inversion? Right. So essentially, this is why sometimes if people actually, when share price actually reflects the quality of a company, why the share price plummets in the olden days. You know, now share price sometimes means something else. But this is why, and this is why sometimes the suppliers complain and you know, the customers, and they say, oh, well, this company has really slipped. It's because that happened. Now, that looks very dramatic. So a company that was at this level of skill plummeted down so many steps, and it happened not in one go, it happened over 2 years. Remember, at first this person got replaced, and that person got replaced. So it kind of like slips, you know, it goes, one side goes down and then the other side goes down like that, you know, after a while. That's how system inversion actually happens in human systems. But the reason why it is so devastating and these sort of plummets down can happen so quickly is again because of the tapering. So as you go from here, you know, the tapering is the same. I mean, here in this example, it's always like a factor of a half, you know. So you have, you know, fewer and fewer jobs here than you have there. And the tapering could be even larger depending on what your organizational structure is. The point is, as soon as somebody leapfrogs who isn't that skilled, because of this tapering, you know, it has a huge effect at this level. I mean, in a sense here, if there are 2 idiots, at this level, it doesn't matter because there are 2, 4, 6, 8 people. 2 idiots and 8, that's not as devastating as 2 out of 2, because that's 100% idiots at the senior management level, right? And that's devastating. Okay, and then just to finish off, this is now just a theory, but are there any real life examples of this sort of system inversion actually happening? And I could think of there are absolutely many, really, when you start thinking about it. But in terms of different types of organization, here I'm really talking about big corporations with big management structures, but also in small firms, and it can happen. And essentially this kind of smaller scale shows you how prevalent system inversions actually are. System inversions are literally just people of lesser skill ending up above people of higher skill, you know, because then they kind of push them down as well. So I could think of two real life examples I know about. One of them comes from surgeries, doctor surgeries. And I actually would have never thought that this is the case, but it turns out that in doctor surgeries, the assistants who actually make the appointments, you know, if you've got a fairly large surgery with many doctors and then a few secretaries, they have huge power, as it turns out. I didn't know that, but depending on what sort of surgery you work for as a doctor, sometimes you end up like a real dog's body. Yes, I know. All the doctors say, oh my God, I would have never thought. Yes, I know. So if you're a highly skilled doctor, you're literally exploited sometimes. But then what can be devastating is if the secretary who's making your appointments is just not really up to the job, either because she actually maliciously schedules the appointments far too tightly, so you're really stressed, or puts in too many appointments in one day, and then you literally just work your guts out as a doctor, and per patient you've got very little time to actually, you know, look into the care. And then what happens is exactly the sort of system inversion. You know, instead of the secretaries reporting to the doctors, because doctors for sure have got, you know, more skills than a secretary, instead of that, you have these surgeries which are, you know, maybe owned by one doctor, or, you know, owned by maybe someone else. And then they employ the doctors, but because there are several doctors and they can share a secretary, you have this tapering, right? Fewer secretaries than doctors. Well, that's already a power asymmetry, you know, in a sense. And then especially when it's the secretaries determining what the doctors actually do. And things like scheduling for a doctor are highly sensitive, right? Because it depends how much time do you have to actually examine a patient, to listen to their story, the details, and then make a diagnosis. So, and actually this sort of inversion in surgeries happens quite a lot of the time, because most of the time, maybe the lead doctor can't really talk to the other doctors directly because they are all with patients all the time, right? They're all working. So what typically happens is that the owner then walks past the front desks and talks to the secretaries, and therefore these people, in terms of power, because they've got a closer, you know, a closer connection to the boss like that, end up with a lot closer contact than the doctors. Yes, that does happen. And then this guy, because he owns the surgery and makes money out of it, tells the secretaries, okay, I want these doctors to, you know, I want you to fit in more appointments. So these secretaries, who only have to pick up a phone and talk to somebody and then just enter something into a little, you know, maybe a computer system or a diary, say, sure, then we'll make, you know, twice as many appointments, or 30% more appointments. That's not a big problem for them. But for the doctors down there, it's absolutely devastating. And then, exactly for this reason, that the secretaries were empowered above the doctors, they should be down here, but instead they got placed there, right, above the doctors. The actual skill of the doctors stayed the same. They could still be making good diagnoses and actually listening to their patients, but they cannot, because they're being kept down by a level of, you know, I don't want to say idiots, but by people who have no idea about medicine and how sophisticated it is. And these people are then empowered by the boss who wants to earn money and who doesn't really go into details about how every doctor deals now with all the individual patients here. You know, let's say these people are the patients, they're not actually part of the organization, you know. These people just come in, and then every doctor's got lots of patients, lots of intricate problems, intricate diseases, takes a lot of attention, focus, and huge amounts of knowledge. This will never be absorbed by the boss. Okay? So already you ended up with a system inversion. in surgeries. And every single time I presented this to doctors I know, they kind of burst out laughing and they say, yeah, that's exactly what happened in our surgery. So I do know that that one is quite common. So that's for doctors. Now, exactly the same setup also occurs, and especially used to occur, as I understand, in the olden days, in an entirely different profession, but that has very similar setup, and that is lawyers. And that is when you have one guy who maybe owns the firm, he's the head of the firm, and then you have maybe partners, you know, a level of partners who just float in occasionally, you know. Or maybe you literally just have one owner and then all the lawyers equal. But then what these lawyers have are also clerks. And clerks in the olden days had supreme power. As I understand, these days it's a bit toned down because they had ridiculous amounts of power. But, so let's now assume this bottom rung here doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to remove them. Okay, so forget about the lower branches. So you just have essentially here a layer of lawyers, again, highly trained, very specialized skills, it takes, you know, a lot of it's high intensity work essentially that very few people are qualified to do. So these people are actually very high value, but if then the owner of the firm takes the clerks and does essentially the same thing as the owner of a doctor's surgery does with the secretaries, and then either, you know, puts pressure on his lawyers by proxy of the clerks, if they have to pass on pressure, don't really understand the subtleties of a case. So if you're then, as maybe a junior lawyer or a trainee lawyer or whatever, you are at their mercy, then these people, because of their lack of understanding, can play havoc with your work, as I understand. And keeping in mind that in the olden days that was even worse. So maybe if you don't think this is that big a problem, it means that you're working in a modern organization where your clerk is really below you. Even though there are fewer clerks, you know, it's still the lawyers, maybe because they're all partners or have a very flat hierarchy. That means you're essentially back up here, right? And then the lawyers, it's like this. The lawyers are really there where they should be, which is here, talking directly to the boss, right? And then the skill set is again, matched like that. If you end up in a structure like that, that's brilliant. Then the skills are up here. However, if the boss does exactly what I said he does, right? The boss stays where he is, but he actually puts in clerks and gives them supreme power over the lawyers. Well, the clerks certainly do not have the skill set of legal partners, do they? They don't even have the skill set of experienced lawyers or, you know, or trainee lawyers. They have the skill set of clerks, of legal secretaries. And then you have this sort of setup whereby you again have this big drop down in quality. Okay, so it happens all the time. So this, what I've described here, comes about this drop in quality because of the inversion of skills at this level here below. Instead of it being like black to green to, you know, the boss, you actually have green to black, and then the black essentially puts a plateau in. So what this is system inversion. Okay, and system inversions are deadly because by just putting very few wrong people into the wrong positions, you can devastate a company for sometimes decades, depending on how easy those people are to get rid of. Thank you for listening, and I hope this was helpful. Bye for now.